doing a trip out to Lake Eyre because we were told that it was in flood, and it doesn't flood very often out Lake Eyre. So I got a friend of mine, Doug, who also owns a Sea Ray the same as this, and we were going to land at the northern end of Lake Eyre in the water, but we decided to land in this spot here because it dried out. And we had fuel on board, so we were planning on just refueling the two planes with an extra 20 litres of fuel so we could make it to William Creek. But as you can see from this footage, that landing on Lake Eyre probably wasn't the greatest decision.
Be a spot to land actually if you want to land. They wouldn't have water here for a while. Down low here it looks pretty good to land on. It's tempting. Well, I'm thinking what you can do is just do a little touch and go. That'd be pretty firm, wouldn't it? I would think so, yeah, it'd have to be where we are. Looks very dry. We'll see if we can land somewhere, right? Righto.
Select landing.
It's fairly firm. Have a look at the wheel. It's not sinking in at all. Oh, it is a bit. Yes, go. Power. We could be f***ed. Come in, Doug. Yeah, I'm here. I wouldn't land here if I were you. It felt really good when we first touched down, but then as soon as we started getting some weight on it, it just dug in. And I tried to power out of it, but then I had to back right off because we were just going to flip over. I don't know what we're going to do. I'm going to have to let the dude dig it out a bit and try and swing it around. I don't know what to do at the moment. Just can you stand by for about 10 minutes? It's a negative. I'm going to William Creek because I don't also want to be a fatality. But we'll keep talking. I've got you marked on my GPS. There's nothing I can do by flying around looking at you. Yeah, roger that. Okay. Before I go, do you want me to drop anything out? Some water?
Yeah, after talking with Doug, it's a shame I didn't listen for a little bit longer because we were short of water. By the time we'd finished pushing, trying to get the plane back airborne and pushing it around on its belly, we were really running out of water fast, and the extra water would have helped. It was quite a concerning time. You know, you go through your whole life without ever being rescued, and then to be set in a situation like we are at the moment, not knowing when somebody's going to come out and not knowing how to ration the little bit of water that we did have is concerning. But we weren't panicked, but there was a feeling of danger. Okay, a lesson. Don't land on sea lake, because you could end up staying here. So what we're doing now is we're just taking everything out of the plane. We're going to see if we can lighten it up enough to be able to take off. And probably going to have to leave Dan here, get him picked up by a helicopter or something. But I don't even know if we're going to be able to get off even when we take all the weight out of the plane. Silly thing to do. Yeah, we tried all sorts of things to get the plane back off the lake. Once we'd landed, we managed to get the gear up. We actually landed with the gear down, which is the correct procedure for landing on a hard surface. But unfortunately, we broke through the surface. The surface was like a 10mm thick crust of salt, and then underneath that salt was like this clayey, moist, wet compound, which was like super glue. But we managed to get the wheels up, retracted, so the plane was actually sitting on the belly of the surface. And we thought if we can get it up on top of the surface, we might be able to slide it along the belly and perhaps do a water take-off along the thing. So we tried extremely hard. We pulled all the gear out of the plane, we lightened the plane up as much as possible. Dan, the passenger, was out of the plane. We tried it both, with Dan in the plane, and then we tried pulling everything out of the plane to get it going. And We got to the stage where we even tried it with both of us out of the plane. We tied a rope to the throttle. We were both behind the plane pushing, trying to get the plane up onto the surface of the lake so we could get enough speed. If we could get it just rolling along, I could probably have jumped into the plane and then maybe have taken off. But we tried this for probably an hour and a half to 2 hours of trying to get the plane to get it back up in the air, but it was just pointless. It was every time that we got it a few inches along the lake, and you can probably see it from the video, that we could just creep along a little bit, but we just couldn't get it over that lump of, it kept on breaking through the surface of the lake. So unfortunately we gave up getting off the lake and set off the EPIRB. Well, we had Doug flying with us, and Doug had taken our location and he was flying to William Creek, but we knew Doug needed to land somewhere as well, so we weren't sure how that was going to pan out. So the decision to set, I did sit there for a while thinking about whether we should turn the EPIRB on or not, and it was the best decision I ever made, was turning the EPIRB on, because that got an instant response from AMSED, who'd phoned my wife at home, Cheryl, and she'd also received a message from my spot that I'd sent off saying that we were okay but we needed assistance. After the message received, I also got on the radio, and because we were so far out in the middle of Lake Eyre, there wasn't a lot of aircraft movements, and getting a signal out, I didn't think I'd get anyone, but I did a pan call, which is not, it's one step down from a mayday, mayday, mayday call. And I managed to contact one of the aircraft flying out of William Creek, doing a joy flight, I think it was. And he had contacted William Creek via the radio and told us that they'd heard about us and they were sending out a helicopter to come out and rescue us. The news of the helicopter coming out was a great relief. We knew that we were going to be rescued within the next few hours, so we swallowed down the last bit of water that we had, and I remember cutting an apple in half and sharing the apple with Dan. It was I've never experienced being so dehydrated and thirsty in my whole life, and I now understand what it's like when you go to the movies and you see somebody lost in the desert and they're dying of thirst. It was an experience.
Want to do it again sometime?
No, I don't think I ever want to do that again. Once the helicopter arrived, we were greatly relieved to see two charming young ladies in the command. We had a pilot and a co-pilot, and they were quickly able to administer water and a bit of insurance that we were going to be okay. The problem that we did have was that the helicopter overheated on landing. And unfortunately, it just got a little bit too hot, which rendered the helicopter unserviceable. Where are we, Dan?
Lake Eyre, Dave.
We've broken the chopper as well.
That's right. The Bermuda Triangle of Lake Eyre.
Nice and soft underfoot.
Now we're going to miss our beer o'clock.
Yeah. So the pilot was on the sat phone that they bought out, and was organising another chopper to come out and rescue us. Yeah, the first chopper got there around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we enjoyed a very beautiful sunset on the lake. It was a beautiful weather out there at the time, and we were informed that the chopper from Moomba would take around about 3 or 4 hours to get out to us, and around about 9:45 at night, which is pitch black, the Moomba chopper came out, which then set off another chain of events. Yeah, once the second helicopter got out to us from Moomba, there was a problem we had, is that we were just about overloaded, because there was the two girls in the chopper plus their spotter, and then there was Dan and myself and the chopper pilot in a Long Ranger, and it was full of fuel at the time, so it could have the endurance to get out to Lake Eyre and then also then to take us to William Creek. It was probably the scariest part of the whole flight, was then taking off on Lake Eyre at night in a helicopter with the pilot using night vision goggles. It was probably it was by far the scariest part of the whole trip. We then spent the next week at William Creek. We had to organise a rescue mission both for my plane as well as the stranded helicopter out there. So a helicopter flew down from Kununurra up in Western Australia where the original helicopter was based. They came down with 2 technicians, and the plan was to fly out to the lake, remove the engine from the helicopter on the lake, sling the engine back to William Creek, fix the engine, and then sling the engine back out to the helicopter out in the middle of Lake Eyre, install the engine. While they're installing the engine back out on Lake Eyre, we were going to get the helicopter that slung the engine out to then hook up to my plane and sling this aircraft back to William Creek. That all worked extremely well, except for the slinging. Yes, unfortunately, that was the last time I saw my plane in one piece. Once the plane had left under the sling, it looked perfect. It was just nicely sitting underneath the helicopter. It wasn't doing anything weird or anything, and our spirits were really high. We were actually writing messages in the lake while the 2 technicians were putting the engine back together in the chopper. But only 20 minutes had gone past, and then all of a sudden we could hear the chopper coming back, and that didn't calculate out right because it was going to be about an hour trip to sling my aircraft back to William Creek, and then probably around about another half an hour for the helicopter to fly back out to pick us up. And on the Howard landing in the chopper, he explained to us that he had to drop my plane because it flew out of control underneath the helicopter. Yeah, that was quite a solemn moment when Howard told me that my plane was a write-off, and that from his inspection that there would be very little that we could salvage from the aircraft. But we were determined to check it out. So once we got the helicopter that had broken down running again, it was getting late in the afternoon, so we were able to fly out to where the plane had been dropped. We landed, and I tried to salvage as much from the aircraft as I possibly could. But it was a very, very sad moment in time. Yeah, well, we had the 2 choppers flying then. We just secured the plane as best we could out on the lake, and I took as many photos of the damage just to work out whether it'd be worthwhile salvaging the plane or just leaving it there in the lake as a memento. It's a very tough decision, and spent quite a lot of time in discussions with the importer of the aircraft later on in the piece to work out whether or not it was worth salvaging the wreck. So yeah, well, we got a lift back to William Creek, and then from William Creek we just caught commercial flights back to Cooper Pedy, then Adelaide, and then back to Brisbane. Once we were back in Brisbane, and I contacted the distributor of the aircraft and shared the photos, we decided that it was worth recovering and that we could possibly just order a new wing kit and do some repairs. There was quite a bit of damage to the plane. The instrument panel had a large amount of damage done to it from being sitting out on the lake. One of the wings was really bent up, so we decided to get all new wings, new tail feathers and everything, but the rest of the plane was good. The engine was still fine, the propeller suffered no damage, and the hull was all intact. So it was just a matter of ordering a whole heap of parts and then just doing a complete rebuild. Upon returning to Brisbane, we worked out that it was going to be, it was still a feasible exercise to rescue the plane and look at rebuilding it. We needed to find a helicopter company that could do the salvage for us. Now, William Creek being out almost in the middle of Australia created a problem because we had to fly a helicopter out from either Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, which was, several hours of flying. And renting a Long Ranger helicopter is a very expensive thing, and it's done by the hour. So what we managed to do was find a company that was ferrying a helicopter from Melbourne out to Ayers Rock, and we were able to then hire it at William Creek because it needed to stop there to refuel. So hiring it from William Creek meant that we were only hiring the helicopter for probably around about an hour and a half to 2 hours, which reduced the cost of salvage. Otherwise it wouldn't have been worth getting the plane salvaged. It would have cost tens of thousands of dollars to fly the helicopter out from Melbourne. Okay, this is where it gets real interesting. I'm in Brisbane, the helicopter's in Melbourne, and the plane's still in the middle of Lake Eyre. We arranged to meet at William Creek. I fly out with a friend of mine from Brisbane out to Lake Eyre. The helicopter flies from Melbourne out to Lake Eyre as well at William Creek, and we hatch a couple of plans. What makes this all interesting is that on flying out to William Creek, the driest place in Australia, it starts raining. And not just a little bit of rain, constant rain. We get to William Creek on the day that we decided to meet this helicopter there, and the moment we landed, it started raining. It rained basically all night. So we hatched up a couple of plans. We ended up going with plan B. There was another helicopter at William Creek at the same time, so we chartered it to fly out to the crash site, and if the crash site was still okay and not too boggy and the rain hadn't started raining out there, we were going to set the plane up ready for slinging and then call up the second helicopter to come out and sling the plane back.
It's good to take your shoes off.
Yeah, always come down there and use these
It's way better than it was last time. It's way better than it was last time. Ah, yes. I feel good. Arriving back at the drop site was a bit daunting because the plane had been sitting there for 2 months, and must have had some strong winds because this whole front hatch had blown off the plane and exposed the dash. So we were there to do a job, and that was to salvage it. So we basically put it all together as best we could. We cut all the fabric out of the wings so the wings wouldn't give the plane any lift and fly out of control again. We'd probably learnt a lot from our first slinging attempt. So this time we got it right, and we got the plane all prepared, called the other helicopter to come out. It came out, hooked it all up. The weather was still good where we were at the lake, and the slinging operation was very successful. Yes, it was a relief to see the plane back up in the air. One of the mistakes we made on the first sling was that we forgot to tie a drogue on the back of the plane, which is it's like a little parachute that hangs off the back of the plane on about a 20 or 30 foot piece of rope. Doing that makes the plane fly in a straight line because it's just causing a bit of drag at the back. And as you can probably see from the footage, that the plane still moves around quite a bit while it was being slung under the plane. Flying back to William Creek, it starts bucketing down, and we're able to get the aircraft back to William Creek, and a friend of mine, Vaughan, had driven from Kalgoorlie in Western Australia all the way up to Lake Eyre to help us salvage the aircraft. We'd stopped at Port Augusta and bought a second-hand boat trailer, and it was an amazing effort on his behalf, and we got the aircraft disassembled and loaded up onto this boat trailer. in what I'd call very inclement weather conditions. Really interesting for the driest part of Australia, out at William Creek, where it very rarely rains. We got 3 days of solid rain. About 4 days before we could actually fly out, and Paul Vaughan, who was driving the wreckage back, he was stuck there for a full week until the roads were dry enough to be able to drive back out on and take the long trip all the way home. When we were able to fly back out, we tracked across where the plane was dropped and also the landing site, and to our amazement it was flooded. It was hard to tell from the air how much water was covering the two sites, but I would dare say there would have been a foot or two of water at both sites, which would have made it near impossible to recover the aircraft. So if we're only just a few hours later in the salvage, we probably would have never salvaged the plane. Yeah, Vaughan eventually arrived back into Brisbane, very exhausted from his 3-day drive, and we squeezed the plane into my little one-car garage and quickly dismantled the plane and went to the process of ordering all the new parts. We ordered a new wing kit, flying surfaces, and the boom tube, which was bent in the accident as well. Yes, rebuilding the plane at home certainly has its advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages was that I could work on it any time that I had some spare time. The disadvantage is that it takes up quite a lot of space. We had the plane in the garage. I was rebuilding the wings out on our back deck. I had stuff downstairs in our pool room. It overspilled into the kitchen and lounge room at stages, so it certainly puts a fair amount of pressure on one's relationship, but it's a good test. Yeah, the wings were quite a process. I didn't realise how much work is involved in building the wings and then covering the wings in fabric and then going through all the processes of putting the material, the painting the material on that shrinks the fabric. It's quite a process, and it was quite rewarding doing it. I enjoyed doing the fabric work. Eventually we got the wings and everything all assembled. The cockpit and the dash was all reassembled, and we got to the stage where it just needed to be transported up to the airfield and then final assembly. The new hatch that we got right here. It's much larger than the old hatch. The old hatch was only a small thing, and it's very difficult to get into there, service any of the parts or controls. So we've come up with this idea of this new hatch, which is much larger, and it gives us a much better access to the front of the plane. Okay, once we got it all together, we needed to paint it, and I did have a contact who had a spray booth, but I didn't want to interrupt his business for a week on end while we put this in and sprayed it. So I came up with an idea that we'd buy a tent and erect it in the backyard, and I had an exhaust fan, and it worked really well. It was quite a bit of setting up, but the good thing was then I wasn't in a rush to get the rest of the plane painted, and I could do it in my own time. We were able to knock down the fence and roll the plane into it, spray the plane, pull the plane out, then put the wings in, spray the wings, and then the rest of the flying surfaces all got done in the wedding chapel. Yeah, we now got these bubble canopies on board, which the Sea Ray is one of the beauties about the Sea Ray. It has a sliding canopy, and as you can see, you can just slide the canopy backwards and forwards, and it's in two halves. It's probably, I think, one of the best parts about this aircraft is that you can open the canopy in flight, so you can take really good photos, video footage. And with the new canopy, we've got these slightly bubbled ones, so it gives you a little bit more headroom, and it gives you the ability to have better downward vision and rearward vision while in flight. Now the plane's all ready, and it's all basically just needs to be assembled. We load it onto the back of a tilt tray truck, and we tow the fuselage up in a tilt tray truck, and a really good friend of mine had a big Pantech truck which we were able to load the wings into, and we transferred the wings up to Caboolture, and we're in the hangar now where we reassembled it all. Yes, it was a huge relief once we got the motor and the wings all attached, everything was up and running to start the engine up, and it started first go after being stationary for 3 years. It was a huge relief. Yeah, while we were rebuilding the plane, we had the opportunity to do quite a few upgrades. We upgraded this front hatch. We also were able to upgrade to the bubble sliding canopies, which we just got these things here, which give you a lot more headroom. I was able to redesign the tail wheel, which gives us a much better turning circle and a much smoother ride. We've got a larger fuel tank in it. We also fitted it with a in-flight adjustable prop, which has also made a difference to the power takeoff and also cruising speed. One of the other upgrades was the freeze ailerons, which gives us much better flight control. Now that the plane is all complete, it's now for some ground testing. So what we need to do is taxi the aircraft around and make sure that it's taxiing okay and that we've got control over it. Now once we've finished the taxiing phase of the testing, we then do some aborted take-offs. So we go to the beginning of the airfield, run the engine up and go tearing down the airfield and basically abort the takeoff at the last minute. We did several runs like that, and then you do a run where you just take off several feet and then pop it back down on the ground to make sure that the plane is going to land straight and that it's not going to go out of control on landing. So a bit of practice there, and then we're ready for the big day, first flight. First flight, it's important that you have both the plane and the pilot in the right headspace. You're obviously wanting to get it done very quickly and get it out of the road, but you're also a little bit nervous. I've spent the last 3 years rebuilding the plane. You don't want to stuff anything up on the first flight. So you plough through tons of paper. There's a whole heap of procedures that need to be followed, and once you're ready and comfortable with all that, you then got to pick a good weather forecast. And unfortunately, the day that we did it was a day similar to today where we had showers, but planes are designed to fly in rain, and so long as it's not pouring down rain, it had some benefits, as in there was very little wind about, which made it easy for landings, and if anything did go wrong, I figured it'd be a nice soft landing on the mushy old grass.
Caboolture traffic, Seaplane X-ray Whiskey Whiskey entering runway 12 for first flight. Caboolture traffic. Alright, here goes. Caboolture traffic, X-ray Whiskey Whiskey, Seaplane rolling 12.
Okay, we've got it all lined up and ready to do our first flight, which went ahead without a hitch. It was really lovely to know that all the effort that was being put in by not only by myself, but my friends that also helped me, and there was a team of people behind the rebuild of this aircraft, which I am very grateful to, and the credits at the end of this film will credit with the recognition they deserve. Yeah, now that we're airborne on the first flight, the first thing we want to do is, and it sounds really strange, is go up and do some stalls. So the reason behind this is that if you're coming in to land, that is the time that the plane is most likely to stall, and you want to make sure that you can experience the feeling of the plane just before it stalls. So it's advisable when you first do your first flight is to go out up to a nice height, which we flew up to 3,500 feet, and then did practice some stall. So you set the plane up in all different sort of configurations, landing configurations, full power. So I went through a series of doing stalls, and stalls sound scary enough, but actually they're not. You just pull the power off, the plane eventually runs out of enough speed and it really just drops the nose and starts heading down to the ground, and you do a recovery. And the idea of practicing this is practicing the recovery as quickly as possibly after the plane stalls. So if you're coming into land and the plane starts to stall, you can recover it before it gets too messy. After we did the stall practice, we did a couple of landing practices high up in altitude. So you basically set the plane up for a landing at say 3,000 feet and pretend the plane is coming in for a landing, just so you've got a feel of what the aircraft is going to do when you're coming in to do your first landing. After we'd finished that, I decided that the weather conditions were really suitable for some water landings, so we touched down on the water in the Brivey Passage and did a couple of touch and goes, which was a huge relief. It was nice to get the plane all finished, built, and do its first flights. And then it was back to Caboolture, where we came in and did a successful first landing.